All right, so people can still hear us as well along with this. So, how's Hong Kong going so far? Oh, sorry, I didn't unmute you. Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
It's pretty
There you
nice
go.
to be back after 12 months. So very excited to be back to one of my menus in the world.
Wow. So you didn't get to see your kids for entire 12 months, right?
My husband, so we were separated for 8 months out of a year, and my dog. But I was with
Oh,
my kids.
wow.
My kids were with me in Australia.
Right. That was because of the COVID, right?
Yes, because of the COVID and the quarantine measures coming back, and the flights were canceled, so we were a little bit trapped overseas.
Jeez, that's a lot. I don't know how you did it, but I guess we don't have any choice.
Well, I'm
All
here
right.
today.
I'm gonna take you down to green room and I'll take over. So I'll speak to you in a second. All righty, all righty, all righty. Hey guys, this is Szebastian Onne, and you're watching Unleash Leaders of Change Season 6. I think this is episode 5. Now, here's the thing, it is episode 5, but it's supposed to be episode 4, and we're not going to go into that. There was supposed to be episode 3 that we haven't done. It will come back after this one, so please don't blame me. That's how I work. Anyway, I'm Szebastian Onne. I'm the Almost Naked CEO. I'm here because I care and because I give a damn to help you dream big and make it happen intentionally. Now, talking about intentions and talking about leadership, this show is all about change, all about leadership. What does leadership require? It requires for us to play together, to work together, to inspire communities, inspire families, inspire everybody around us to be a better version of themselves. But can we be a good leader if we are suppressing other voices? And that's because of prejudice that we don't even know we have. And I'm going to be the first one to say I had prejudice. I'm going to be very honest. Around 2 decades ago, I can say I was a racist. I didn't know that, but I was. And that's because I just decided because of somebody's race, something is good or bad. And that's how I treated them because of my perception. So I did not know. I used to say I'm inclusive. I used to say that I respect people for who they are. And that's how my family raised me. But I did not know that I was a racist. It took a challenge from somebody, literally a challenge from somebody to, they challenged my mindset. They challenged my outlook towards a certain uh, country or race, you can say, and I took the challenge. That's when the first time, within half an hour, I was in tears and I realized I wasn't inclusive. I was indeed a racist. I couldn't believe myself. I was heartbroken because that was against everything that I am or what I thought I was. So inclusivity is such a huge thing, but another thing that plays a big role in that is understanding the cultures, understanding the differences, and creating a space that makes people included. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, as you know, I don't like to read bios and everything. I just like the guests to be known in their own words. Here's a little intro about today's guest, Veronica Llorca-Smith. She is just so much fun and so much value, so much information, so much knowledge, so much kindness and wisdom. You got to check her out. Here we go.
You're watching Dreamaniac TV. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Llorca-Smith, and I'm originally from Spain, but I've lived in 9 countries. So the story of my life really has been a story of change, a story of trying to be included, and a story of really getting to know the world. These countries are Spain, France, Brazil, the Netherlands, Italy, Taiwan, Hong Kong, China, and now I live in Australia. And so change has been something really important for me, and being included has been something that I've always aimed at. So now that I have 20 years experience in the business world, working for big companies like Apple and Estee Lauder, one of my big objectives in the business world has to be to create an environment where people feel included. I'm a super advocate of inclusion, diversity, equity. When you're talking about inclusivity, in my experience, for example, I had a big team in 14 different countries in Asia Pacific, from Australia, New Zealand, North Asia, Southeast Asia, extremely, extremely diverse. The first point that people focus when they think on diversity is a different language. So for many people, English is, of course, not the first language. And I think it's really important to talk about linguistic inclusion and making sure that everyone, no matter what accent you have, I have an accent and I'm speaking today in a podcast, it shouldn't be a problem. So for me, making sure that everyone is able and is encouraged and knows that their voice is heard and is valuable is something that's super important. I live in Australia now, and here, just like, for example, in New Zealand or in the US, people are super open, they're very vocal. The education is all about collaboration. People are used to speaking in teams, and that's part of the culture from the moment that you're very, very little all the way to becoming a leader. That's really embedded in the culture. From my experience in other countries, especially more in North Asia, like Japan or China, where it's all about the bowing and the reference and the authority, it's a little bit different. People, when they put their hand up, they probably have thought about what they want to say twice. And so trying to create this environment where everyone is willing to participate without being judged, where everyone really wants to be a part of the conversation. I think this is really what a leader should focus on, to have companies and a society that is really a reflection of the world. And so that we don't have like this big disconnect between the world itself and what we see in the business world. Hi, I'm Veronica Llorca-Smith, and you are watching Unleash Leaders of Change.
You know what to do. And here you are, the unleashed leader of change, Veronica Llorca-Smith. So, well, that introduction quite a bit said everything, but there's so much more about you that I would love people to know. So, you've already talked about who you are and what you do in your video. But Veronica, other than that, you've been in 9 different countries, not traveled, you've lived in 9 different countries. You've actually grown up in 9 different countries. Tell us a little bit about growing up in different countries. How was it?
Absolutely. And first, I'd like to say good morning, good evening, and hello, Grandma. I always wanted to do that to break the ice.
Absolutely.
So,
You better
yes.
be watching. So she's in Spain, right?
Yes. So I'm going to tell a story that for me, it really represents the story of my life. And when I was 5 years old, we moved from Spain to France with my family. When you're 4 or 5 years old, you don't really know about languages or cultures. All you want is to play. And I was parachuted in this little school. And I wanted to play with all the kids. I saw the toys and the kids playing. And when I got closer, they were speaking a language that I didn't understand. I didn't know about languages. I just knew that I wanted to belong. And for me, that was the very first part that I felt I'm an outsider and I want to belong. And I think everybody has that feeling at some point. So that, I think, has been like my first memory, of the story of my life in terms of moving overseas and having that international experience.
Love that. Now, here's the thing. You said, feeling like an outsider. So at a very early age, you already started feeling excluded. You already started feeling that you were not part of the normal group. Growing up, as a child, maybe you did not understand so much, but growing up, how did you feel as you were moving country to country to country? How did that work out for you in terms of feeling excluded and having to sort of try to fit in? How did you cope with all that?
It was a process, to be honest. Personally, I like to say that I'm an introvert by birth, but I had to become an extrovert by necessity. And so you can imagine someone, right? Someone who doesn't speak the language and is a bit of an introvert, and you have to put yourself out there. So it was challenging, but it was a process, I would say. So when I was little, I didn't understand that there were different languages. I just knew that I wanted to belong, and so I learned French. And then when we moved to the next country, which was Brazil, I was almost a teenager. I was like 11, and so I was perfectly aware that they speak a different language there, Portuguese, that it was a different culture. And so I consciously started the process of masking. Masking as in you want to belong. You want to speak not only the same language, but you want to speak with the same accent. You want to dress the same way. You want to use the same street language. And I did. And honestly, like the other day on the Gold Coast, I was in the lift, and one woman, she looked at me and she said, "Brazilian, you can't hide it when you see one." And I was like, "Yeah, right." So I did the
Right.
mask. You just wanted to belong. And then for my teenage years, I think we all mask one way or the other. You're a teenager, you want to belong. What was
Yeah.
interesting though is when I became an adult, what was a challenge for me, this whole idea of not really belonging to the culture, having to learn different languages. It really became my advantage. So I call it my superpower. What was my challenge of like not speaking the language, having an accent, being the foreigner. Now I'm here today because of that. So there's also a message that sometimes when you go through a challenge, you can turn things around and turn it into a superpower. So I encourage everyone to find theirs.
Right. And I think it is about the mindset, right? All those challenges could have made you a different person, but you made the choice to be a positive person, to learn from the experience. And I agree, we try to fit in the boxes, and it is hard. Being an immigrant myself, I get it. Um, the first thing is, and what's funny, I tell me if you've experienced this, when people actually try to guess your accent, and there's like, you're not Spanish enough for Spain, you're not Australian enough for Australia, or Brazilian enough for Brazil. So how did that feel? How did you cope with that? How did you react to that when somebody said, "Oh, you don't have this accent, but you also don't"? Have you had these kind of reactions?
Absolutely. Like, where is this accent from? And one of the questions that I dread to this day is, where do you come from? Because I feel
Yeah.
that I'm always an imposter. So
Right.
when I say that I'm from Spain, and they're like, "Where from Spain?" I'm like, "From the Canary Islands." Oh, but that accent, I'm like, "Oh no, they caught me." So I honestly feel like I'm an imposter.
Well, it's because you've been in 9 different countries. You've really grown up in 9 different cultures. I want to quickly take in a couple of comments. So Jody is saying hi, and she also says leadership requires active listening and taking action. Absolutely. If you're not listening, you're not a leader. Leadership is not about talking; it's about listening, which I should do more of. And Patty says, hello, such an important topic. And love that, introvert by birth, extrovert by necessity. Me too. I have a term for that, Veronica and Patty. I do have a term for that. I call myself trained extroverted introvert. Really, I have trained myself to be extrovert. But if you leave me alone, I promise you, next 6 months, you don't come and check on me, and I'm happy. I'm really happy. Okay. Talking about all of that, growing into different countries, different cultures, learning different languages, um, and then actually becoming a leader of brands like Apple and Estee Lauder. How did that happen? Because for me, here's what I'm picturing. Okay, you've been to so many different cultures. Every place has different kind of education system, different languages, different culture. How do you find the courage to apply it to a brand like Apple or Estee Lauder? Because I haven't experienced except 2 countries. I would be so confused. How did you do it?
So it's actually quite a fun story. I was living in Hong Kong at the time, and there was no Apple store in Hong Kong. So this was 2000, end of 2011. And they were getting ready to open that store, and I was passing in front of it as they were just getting all the stuff ready. Sadly, it was the day that Steve Jobs passed away. So there were a lot of flowers and notes at the door of the store. And so I stopped to just look around because I'm such a big fan of Steve, and many of the things that I say are inspired by him. And as I was looking around, there was a team of managers that they're clearly managers, like they were talking about the store, they were wearing the Apple badge, and I happened to know one of them. So I approached her and I said, "Oh my God, how amazing that you're working for Apple. Wouldn't it be amazing? What a dream." I had no second intentions. I'm not an IT person. I never thought myself, working for Apple. And next thing, her name is Christina. She is actually Spanish as well. She said, "You should totally come and work for us." And my answer was like, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do, but sure, I will." the week after, I was in an interview with the Apple team, and I said, first thing, I don't want to be an imposter. I'm not a tech person, but this is what I can bring to the table. I've lived in all these different countries, and I've done business development in China, and you put me in front of a challenge, and I'm just going to jump on it, and I'm going to learn to swim. So that's how
I love
Apple.
that. I love that. I didn't even realize how much we have in common, because that's how one of my favorite jobs started. Literally, a little bit different. Um, I was fan of a magazine. I just wrote to the CEO, and next thing I knew, I had a job with them. I didn't know what to do, but I had a job with them, and it was one of the best jobs I had. So, one thing that you have talked about is culture inclusivity as a leader. How did you've also, not only you've been in different cultures, but you've also led teams from different cultures. What kind of challenges do you see, and what experiences do you see where you feel like there is not enough inclusivity culturally for the teams?
Mhm. So for me, honestly, it was a journey of learning from my own mistakes as well, and the things that didn't work. And especially with COVID, you had the challenge of not only having teams that were diverse, but you had the technology on top. So how do you make sure that you have a room where everybody speaks, where everybody has a voice? And my very first realization is that very often I would host meetings. So I'm talking about regional meetings in Asia Pacific, where I had managers from 14 countries, 14 different countries. And very often at the end of the call, I realized that 20% of the audience or the participants or so on made 80% of the conversation. And I would leave that meeting thinking, yeah, that 80% is good, is a representation of my team. But I realized it wasn't. I was like, well, I haven't heard from her, and I haven't heard from Anya, and I haven't heard
Right.
from Krishna. And so that for me was the first realization. So I realized, okay, there's an elephant in the room, and I have to tackle it. So for me, that was a big challenge. And I set my goal, 100% equals 100%, meaning every single voice has to be heard. That's the only way that I can know what is really happening there. And funny enough, what I started to do is, after many of these meetings, check on one-on-one and say, hey, do you actually feel this way? This is the opinion of the so-called majority. And very often
Right.
it wasn't. It wasn't. So that was like a big wake-up call for me.
So let's backtrack a little bit. How did you realize that you're missing out on people? Did something happen? Was any kind of feedback, or was that something you just realized on your own? You sort of, uh, you know, how did you
So
recognize that?
someone put it in the comments, active listening. When you're really 100% listening on what's happening, and not only what's being said, but also what's not being said. I think that's the moment when I realize, okay, there's something to fix it. So a bit of a moment of self-awareness, a bit of a moment of not focusing on what I want to say, but focus on what the people want to say and what they're not saying. So I think that was that self-awareness moment for me.
And I think that's what happens. Being leaders, managers, we tend to give our message. We tend to say what we want to, what our vision is, what we want to do, all those excitement, but we forget that there's other people in the team. And I think that's not just a culture. I think that's the leadership thing. You need to be able to include everyone. And I remember when we were talking, you also talked about language. How is language a barrier, but how can you make it more inclusive in your experience? Because you've actually done that. You've actually taken actions to make it possible.
Mhm. So absolutely, language is a big barrier, and I think native English speakers, they don't really realize that when someone who has English as a second language is putting their hand up there are a lot of thoughts that go through our mind. Am I going to do the right thing? Basically, I'm not only thinking what I want to say, but also how I'm going to say. And making sure that I'm understood, and the accent and all of that. So it's definitely a big challenge. One thing that is very basic, but I recommend every leader to do, is make the effort of learning people's names. And I know some languages are very difficult. For me in particular, like the Thai names are like, oh my God, they're not only difficult, but they're like this long, like they don't even fit in the screen. And so learning those names, it actually makes people feel I'm valued here and I belong. And I've heard of other leaders, even like doing short names for, oh, I'm going to call you JD. No, my name is not JD, is whatever, whatever it is. So the first thing is taking the time to learn people's names. I think that makes such a huge difference. And the other thing, and it's also very simple, I think inclusion doesn't have to be very complicated, because inclusive leadership is good leadership. If you don't know what to do, go back to the basics. Inclusive leadership
Right.
is good leadership. So little things like at the beginning, setting up the ground rules for the meeting, creating a safe environment is so important. And I'm not only talking about safe as, oh, you're feeling safe in this space, but safe as in who you are. So saying little things like, hey, we know that English is not the first language for everyone. Actually, that means that you speak a second language. Good on you, right? And so reinforcing
Right.
that. And also encouraging people to speak is not about your accent or how you speak, is about great ideas. Great ideas, they don't have languages. There is a universal, great ideas are universal. So really sending like those positive, empowering messages at the beginning. I think setting those ground rules are great. Another thing that worked for me as well, and this is not only about culture, but it's about people's differences. If you're an introvert, chances are you might not want to put your hand up and speak, in front of 50 people in a virtual meeting, especially if it's not your first language. So maybe you can give all the channels, like, for example, the chat, where people can actually put their ideas there, or making sure that there's like a smaller breakout groups where people can be more comfortable. So I think there are all these little things, that you can do that are going to make your leadership much more inclusive and therefore better.
Right. And I think it's also important to kind of understand the culture as well, because, as you were saying when, we were talking offline, one of the things is that in some cultures, it's difficult to ask questions. In some cultures, it's so okay, questions are the normal thing, but in other cultures, they're not. So, especially the cultures where, Asian cultures, Middle Eastern cultures, you just, so you think twice, you think three times before you ask. How do you encourage somebody like that to participate, to be part of the entire team, and know that you're getting the feedback and it's okay to ask questions?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good point. And honestly, it's not easy, but I think it goes back to the point of I was mentioning before of creating a safe environment. If you really feel in your heart that it's safe to participate, chances are you will. There's another element that I think is key for a leader, and is creating the trust. If you have a manager that is maybe new, or maybe from one of those countries where feedback is not so socialized as it is in the West, for example, doing like the one-to-one check-ins, I find that works really well. Very often what I would do is check in before the meeting and say, hey, I know that you have experience in this meeting. Would you mind sharing during the meeting? And it's almost an invite to participate. I would never call people out because it's uncomfortable. But if you create this safe environment where you're encouraging them, you're almost like their sponsor, you're giving them the little push. They have to jump. I'm not going to push them, but you're creating like this trust, which I think is critical for them to feel that it's okay for them to share. Also, one thing that I find is very useful, and again, small things, is sending the agenda of what you're going to talk beforehand, especially for
Right.
people for whom English is not the first language. It allows you to process, it allows you to have your thoughts, so that when you're into the meeting, you can focus really on what you want to say versus how am I going to say this? Is the right word, and all of that.
Right. I agree. One of the things that you said is really important. Agenda is, it just helps them understand, what to expect. Mentally be prepared, if they're technical or anything else, whatever their skill is, to be prepared to share. Sometimes if you have the preparation, it's easier to talk because you have a little bit more confidence. And one of the things you said, and I'm going to first put up this comment, I think it is from uh, Emo, you do okay. I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. That's what we're talking about. So, and that's what your point as well is. As an executive in an organization, it is important to know the names of your team as well as ask them what their preferred name is. It is so true. And you were making that point as well. You know what? That's actually uh, conflict I have with so many people, because, as you know, in Australia, people will make Richard into Ricky or Rich, right? And Sebastian becomes Seb or Zeb. I don't like it. I absolutely don't. It has nothing to do with culture. I think it's to do with personal preference. And I think it is very important to understand how to, you were saying that I'm going to call you this, going to call you JD. I think we need to ask permission. We need to really understand, does the person actually appreciate being addressed that way? Does it culturally offend them, or is there any other reason? I don't like at all. I'm going to be very honest. I don't like at all to be called Zeb or Seb or Sebi or all that. It pisses me off, to be honest. I really, when somebody calls me Zeb, let's suppose, you're Veronica. If you call me Zeb, my response normally is, "Hi, Anita." And you're like, "What? I'm not Anita." Like, I'm not Zeb. you know? So sorry for talking so much, but that's really a touchy point for me. And I think that's what I'm saying. And that's what Emo is saying as well, that knowing the names of your team is really important, and asking them what is their preferred name, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I totally relate, by the way. I married an Australian, and so I became V without even having a say in it. But I realized that Australians, they love to shorten all the words. So I guess it's part of the culture. But yes, on the topic of the name, I think it's so important. I will add also a caveat on that, not only the name, but also asking or letting people, not asking, letting people share their preferred pronouns if they want. Like, again, I think it's one of these delicate topics. You don't want to go around the table and say, "Tell me your pronouns." But if I say, "Hi, everyone, I'm Veronica. My preferred pronouns are she and hers. If you feel more comfortable disclosing you, by all means, you're totally welcome. But this is a safe environment, so you're in the driver's seat, and just know that whatever you want to share, we're here to support you." And I think that also is really important, not only the name, but your identity.
I love that. And you may have noticed, and I'm going to put that back again, that on banners as well, we actually put the pronouns up because, my pronouns are they, them, and babe. And some people find babe funny, but that's it. Those are my pronouns. And I really appreciate people. It's hard for constantly reminding people. I don't like it when constantly people say, "Oh, I forgot." It's a habit, and I just go, "Well, no, it's just you not respecting my identity, really." So I appreciate you actually saying to acknowledge the pronouns, and really respecting people for who they are. And we have a couple of more comments. Blue Roads Education says, "Yes, permission is key. I hate to be called Pat." Okay, Patty, I will remember that. Glad I don't ever say anybody's name like that. I just say exactly what they are. I have a funny story I tell people to make them stop that. My husband's girlfriend before me was Pat, and he only made that mistake once.
I bet.
Love it. Love it. Maria Campos says, "Great tips, Veronica. I also found that showing your vulnerability as a leader is such an encouraging message for teams who then realize leaders are also human with faults and fears." I could not agree more with that, right? Because letting your team know that you're human too helps them be more open with you, right?
Absolutely. And I think I write a lot on LinkedIn, by the way. Please like. I wrote about vulnerability. And I think vulnerability, I used to think that it was a sign of weakness. And if you had talked to me 5 years ago, you would probably see, "Oh, there's this Iron Woman," because I actually did an Ironman. And
Right.
I didn't want to show any weakness. I really wanted to show like this strong side of me. And lately, because I've been through a lot of changes in my life, I started to be much more open and vulnerable, and let people see the struggles. And it's been amazing. Like, people relate, people want to talk to you, people that I haven't talked in years, they come to me and like, "Hey, thank you for sharing this story." Like, it just makes you more human. And the same applies to leadership. When you're talking openly about your mistakes, but also what you learn from them, I think it makes your team feel like this is someone that I want to work with, someone that has the vulnerability to admit mistakes, and to learn from them and to share them openly. So yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. And Patty's saying, telling that, that joke about Pat makes people chuckle, but they never make the mistake again. I love that. You know what, Patty, I'm actually going to tell you, this is a story, Veronica, I want to share because you've brought this really great topic. There was a lady in our team who would always call me Mick. I have no idea why. I can understand. So speaking of cultures, I have a 9.5 long name. So I have 9 names in my name, and one of them is Rick. And she would always call me Nick. She worked with me by that time for almost 3 years. It annoyed the hell out of me. Her name was Susan. So here's what I started doing. Next time she called me Nick, I said, as I said, so I was like, "Hi, Sally." She's like, "What? I'm not Sally." "Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie." "What? What's wrong with you?" I'm like, "You've been calling me Nick for last 2 years. So why can't I call you whatever I like?" And then she never called me Nick again, you know? So, and Iron Man, wow. I was gonna actually say that. But the point you were making about vulnerability, that is so true. We the society tells us to be strong, to not show what's going on, right? And I think being leader, we need to understand that's also a cultural obstacle sometimes we have, because the culture I come from, there's a saying, "I would rather be beheaded, but I would never ask for help." That's actually a very central core of pride. It took me a long time to realize, no, if I need help, I need help, and I've got to ask for it. So, uh, okay, we have lots of other comments. So I'm sorry, I'm just going to take those first. Jody says, "I think as a leader, we need to stay agile and understand that each generation and each person is uniquely different. We have different needs and wants. It goes back to active listening and compassion for the human spirit," right? And I think this is Emo again. Thanks for reading the comment. And yes, you said my name correctly. It is Emo, like like Elmo. Okay. Emo, Ilmo. Okay. I'm sorry. If I'm saying it wrong now, I apologize. However, I hate when people call me Mo and Momo without my consent. Absolutely. We are making it a point here, Veronica. We are succeeding here.
It triggers people. I'm not surprised. It really does, because the first thing that defines your identity is your name. Is the first thing that you do. It's the first thing that you know. So it triggers people when they don't get it right, and it's a small gesture. And on this, I do have to tell a story, and it is about leadership, but a different type of leadership. My
Hold on
girls
to
and
that story. Hold on to that story. We'll take a quick break and we'll come to that story in a second. All right. Sorry.
Because I actually wanted to become a teacher at some point when I was a teenager. But then I was thinking, because I was still in Romania back then, we moved to Canada in 2017 together with my family. So I was still there, and I was thinking, look, if I become a teacher, I'm going to starve, because, teachers are not very well paid. We all know that. So I wanted to become a lawyer after that. And then my mom said, "Oh, you can't become a lawyer because you're going to talk to criminals all day. And I don't want this for you." So it's funny. It's funny then, because I ended up working in an international law firm and actually being sort of the in-house teacher, because I was a trainer, working with millennial leaders across the globe and helping them become dream bosses, build dream teams, and really lead different. I've been doing this in my business for the past 4 years now. Absolutely. And I believe that, you have all of these assessment tools that tell you you're one thing or another, and we use them as labels and as excuses a lot, rather than using them as helping us understand more about how we work and what makes us powerful and what makes us motivated and engaged. This is what they're there for. And we've been using them wrong. And this is what I find with a lot of people. We hide behind these sorts of labels. So if I could change the world, I would build personal development skills gyms, just like your normal gym. Like, people would go there to train their personal skills. That's what I would do. I am Roxana Radulescu, and you are watching Dreamaniac TV.
You know what to do. So that was Roxana. That's the upcoming episode of Almost Naked Conversation. Make sure to check it out. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. And let's continue the conversation again with Veronica. I'm Szebastian Onne, the Almost Naked CEO. And with me is Veronica Llorca-Smith. She is the project leader of Leaders for Good. I hope that's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. And Veronica, you also have a title, CEM. Please explain.
So CEM is my most important job, and it stands for Chief Executive Mom. So basically,
Love
you
it.
get everything: logistics, operations, emotional support, psychologist, everything at once.
The question is, are you getting paid well for that?
Well, it's a little bit underpaid, but I'm negotiating.
Love it. You 8 months, you said you were away from your partner and different countries because of COVID restrictions and everything. Now, that's another big cultural shock for everybody. How did you cope with that as a family, as a professional, as a leader? How did you cope with that? And what kind of experiences you saw around you that made you think like, well, we need to make this, we need to make more changes?
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of context to the audience, I was living in Hong Kong with my family, with my husband, my dog, my daughters, and we went on holidays. But unfortunately, me with my two daughters. But unfortunately, the regulation and the quarantine changed in Hong Kong, and we couldn't come back. So I like to tell the story how I accidentally moved to Australia, because that wasn't really the plan. So yes, we ended up being separated for 8 months out of 12, which is really long. And the first thing is, people always told me, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I don't know how you did it. And I'm like, I couldn't do it either. But that's the whole thing of resilience. Resilience is not doing the things that you think you can do. It's doing the things that you think you cannot do. So that's the first thing, being super resilient. The second thing is in terms of, especially in a partnership, any type of partnership, I think communication is key. And for me, having those conversations with my husband to make sure that we were on the same page, to make sure that we reassess, what we're doing. Is there a better way of doing it? I think always reassessing. And for me, the positive spin, the positive spin of saying, I'm in an amazing country in Australia. My kids have an amazing opportunity here to learn to swim like fishes and to see kangaroos in the wild and to really take the positive of every experience that you have. I always believe that there is always something positive. So really, when you're having like those down moments, try to bring yourself up and say, hey, this is actually really great. Like, I'm giving an amazing opportunity and let's make the most of it. So I think, yes, to summarize, being resilient, having communication, and looking at challenges as opportunities.
I think that's what it is, having that positive mindset and, finding an opportunity even in an obstacle is what leadership is. Because you're trying to find a solution to an answer to a problem rather than throwing your towel in and just going, oh, I can't do this. So that, first of all, congratulations on doing that, because again, what choice did we have? We didn't have a choice. We just had to, when people say, I don't know how you could do it, well, what choice did I have? That's what we have been put on. We have a comment from Jose saying, great leadership speech, Veronica, love it. Looking forward for every of your posts. Love your Prima. I hope I said that right. Is that right, Prima?
Prima's
Right.
cousin. That's actually my cousin from Spain.
There you go. Somebody from Spain. Thank you for joining us, Jose. And he's saying, oh, okay, that's the same comment again. I love that you're joining us from Spain. You're making us truly international. But also, that's one of the things. As a mother, as a leader, as a team member, having to cope with all the changes, to go through all that and still operate, it does take leadership. It requires you to think on your feet and be inclusive. Now that environment has changed, everybody's working remotely. How do we go around that? But before we go into that, you were telling a story when I cut you off. If you still remember it, do you want to go back into that, please?
Yes, and it's a very meaningful story. It's about names. So for those who just joined, we were talking about the importance of names. And as a leader, the number one thing that you should do is really learn the names of your team. And the bigger the team is, the more important it is actually that you learn everybody's names. And my story is that now that we are living on the Gold Coast in Australia, my little girls, they go to the local school there. It's a huge school. It has over 1,000 kids. And there is this woman. She's effectively called the lollipop woman because she holds like a stop sign, and she helps control the traffic so that the kids can go safely to school. And I just noticed, like every day I was going there, and she was calling all the kids by their name, like my kids, random kids, other kids. One day she even called me by my name, and she has a tag that says Kelly, so I knew that her name was Kelly. So I said, Kelly, do you know the names of all the kids here? And she says, yep, 1,171 names.
Wow.
That's my job, she said. Like, what a leader.
I love it. I'm so proud of her. And if you can find her, I want to bring her on the show. Oh my God, that's amazing. Well, that's what inclusiveness is, and she's teaching kids from the very beginning, from their childhood. She's teaching to remember names. I absolutely love that. Now, let's move to a little bit different angle. Now, you've taken a new role as a project leader in Leaders for Good. Am I right? Okay, tell us, how did you bag that role and what are you doing there?
Yeah, so Leaders for Good is an amazing organization. And I say that they're amazing because what we do is help companies bring more diversity, more inclusion, more equity into their organizations, either through a strategy or through specific workshops. So the vision is really to have better leadership, more inclusive leadership, because ultimately inclusive leadership leads to an inclusive world. Now, there are many companies that do that. What I had never seen any company that is a nonprofit do is to give the 50% of the profit to social causes. So social causes for women to have more equity and more parity, for example, in Cambodia. So 50%, 50 of the profits go to that. And when I heard that from the founders, Carrie and Phil, I was like, wow, this is really the type of company that I want to work for, somewhere where you can actually make a little dent in the universe, like Steve Jobs said.
Absolutely.
I thought that this was my opportunity. And so I put my hand out there. And I will say one thing, and I really hope this message comes across. When I sent my application, they replied to me and they said, is there anything we can do to make your interview more accessible? And
Oh, wow.
that's
Love that.
it was so simple, but because I was by myself in Australia and I have to do the pickup of the kids and everything, before they sent that, I was just hoping that the interview will take place during the hours that I was at home, because otherwise I
Right.
would feel guilty about being a mom and having to choose whether I do the pickup or whether I'm the exception and I have to ask for the time to be moved. And for me, that question, it actually gave me permission to say, this is me and this is what I need. And in my case, it was being a mom with 2 kids. But for someone else, the accessibility might mean something else. It might mean, like, I have, for example, a challenge for sighting, so I would need a bigger font. Or maybe someone else is colorblind or whatever that is. But by asking that question, and I actually wrote a post about it because I thought it was so powerful, and it can be scaled. It doesn't have to be only for an interview, for a meeting. If you're going to have a meeting, you can ask that question and you're not pointing out. She didn't ask me, are you a mom? Do you need the school pickup? He was, feel
Right.
free. I'm giving you permission to tell me what you need. And I'm stealing that. Every single time I'm going to do an interview or a meeting or whatever, I'm just going to ask that very simple question. How can I make this more accessible for you?
That's an awesome point. It's so beautiful. I already love the organization, even though I don't know much about them, but I love it. And I absolutely agree. The way, you just said, they just asked you a very open-ended question and allowed you to choose what is the, situation that you need help with. And I think that actually speaks a lot about them as an organizational culture as well. I love that they're giving 50% back to the community. I love that, they actually ask you accessibility. Guess what? You can go and tell them. And if you're watching, guys, I'm going to ask this question every time to all my guests, all my clients from here on, no matter what, and my team, because I never thought about that. And I think that's a very important question, very culture inclusive question, really. Absolutely.
And a little follow-up on that is that we are presented with opportunities every single day in our life to be a little bit more inclusive. We might not realize it, but little things like this, it really makes an impact. So I did mention in one of our previous shows that if you're not being intentionally inclusive, you might be unintentionally exclusive. And so just have that self-awareness, like, what can I do to make this a little bit more inclusive, to make sure the person who doesn't speak the language feels included as well. So keeping that in mind for me was really like an aha moment, a moment of awakening.
I love that. I'm feeling exactly the same way. It is an awakening. And I love, what Blue Roads Education, Patty is saying as well. What a wonderful question. Opening the door from the beginning to have human needs. Exactly. It's beautiful. Please pass my regards to the company that it is really a question that's going to change so many people and so many mindsets. Uh, Patty, you don't need to steal that. We're giving you full copyright. You can use it as much as you like, because I'm going to use it. So now I'm being told that we need to take another break. So we'll take another 2 minutes break and we'll be right back.
I need to talk about men's mental health more. I think that's the understatement of the century. I think we generally don't have a place to go as guys unless you have some sort of church, or there's organizations, AA, NA, church, and there's things like that, but that doesn't catch everybody. There's a number of folks, guys out there that don't have a place to go. And I think that having more access to discuss what it is that bothers us as guys would create healthier family systems. Honestly, I think guys are looked at as being leaders in the family, and we don't feel, and we lead, and we absorb the bullets and the blows, and we just continue to lead. We don't talk about our stuff. We handle everybody else's stuff, and we're people too. We're human, and we have our stuff, and it's scary. And to improve men's mental health, I think that we, like I said, it starts at home plate. Educating folks on how to interact in a way that's meaningful, and making it about that human connection. And I really feel like it like our education system needs to be more spearheaded toward mental health and addiction, and that could be specific to the gay community, the female, male, across the board, whatever it is, to meet folks where they're at and to educate them and provide resources to getting their own needs met, so that then when they get to be older, they do relationships better, and we don't land outside of our family on our own trying to take care of ourselves and be broken because of all the experiences we had and look to resources and not sure what to do. And then we spend the next 30 years until we're 50 trying to figure it out. I think it should be required across the board, middle school and high school, that you have certain mental health and addiction related curriculum that you have to complete in order to get your, to advance in the next grade, get your diploma, et cetera, to move on. I'm Brian Wall, and you're watching Almost Naked Conversation.
You know what to do. And we're back. You're watching Unleashed Leaders of Change, Season 6, Episode 5/4. That's a funny story, so you're going to have to go back and watch why it's 5/4. And I'm talking to Veronica Llorca-Smith. She is the project leader of Leaders for Good and Chief Executive Mom. I love that title. When I'm a parent, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change my title. And I am Szebastian Onne, the Almost Naked CEO. I'm here because I care and I give a damn to help you dream big and make it happen intentionally. So let's talk more with Veronica about culture inclusive leadership. Now, Veronica, leadership itself has challenges. Actually, you know what? Backtrack. Sorry, my producer just told me I'm missing something. So first of all, everybody's curious, what are the 9 countries you have lived in? Tell us a little bit.
Okay, so Spain, France, Brazil, Netherlands, Italy, Taiwan, China, Hong Kong, and Australia. I didn't miss any. 9 right there.
Oh my God. Okay. You're like a walking encyclopedia for culture, right? So we should just sit with you and we'll learn so much. There are so different cultures. Absolutely. Did you struggle with it? Other than, of course, trying to fit in, but did you struggle with languages and I think food and weather. How was all that for you?
I struggled every single day. Yes. But to be honest, like the struggle got bigger. I would like to say that it got smaller, but it got bigger because the first countries that I lived in, they were still Western countries. Sure, Brazil is different, but Portuguese and Spanish are relatively similar. Then I learned Italian, which was like a walk in the park almost because I already spoke a couple of Latin languages. When I landed in Taiwan, and I looked around and I saw like these Chinese characters everywhere, and people didn't speak a single word of English. And not only that, but the body language is also different. So the way that they say
Right.
me or me is completely different. I was like, wow, this is a completely new world. So yeah, you struggle everywhere. But I would say that the biggest the struggle, the biggest the reward as well. So for me, learning Chinese was by far the most rewarding language, because it was so hard. Like it was so hard. I'm a bit of a freak of languages. I did not have Wi-Fi at home for one entire year, so that my only entertainment would be Chinese public TV, which is not very entertaining. So it was pure torture, and that's how I learned Chinese.
I love that. Now, here's the thing. As a leader, we already have challenges, I was saying, but also there are, when it comes to cultures, there are additional challenges: language, the mindset, as you're saying, body language, so much more. What do you say to leaders? What can people do to understand these differences and make their leadership a lot more inclusive, uh, other than just the language as well?
So I think you touched upon it a little bit at the beginning when you were talking about your own biases. And I think people don't realize, and I did not realize myself either, that we all have biases and they are unconscious. The reason why they're unconscious is because every second we process 11 million pieces of information, not every minute, every second, sounds, touch, stimulation. So our brain is trying to process all that information, and the easiest way to do that is by putting things in boxes, and because we are humans, we have a tendency to prefer the box of familiarity. If someone is from Spain, I'm naturally going to develop an affinity with that person, and all the similar biases. And so I think for people to understand and be self-aware that we all have biases, and that it's okay, it's natural, but just being aware and making sure that we reset so that we can level the playing field. I think that's something that's key. And the moment that you're able to reset that button and see, actually, I might have a bias here. I might think that because this role is, for example, when I applied for a role in China, they said, oh, we don't think that a woman is really suitable for this role because China is a very difficult country. So being aware of these things and making sure that they don't play a role in your mind. So for me, that piece of self-awareness and understanding your own unconscious biases is the very first point. And the second one, someone in the audience mentioned before, is the active listening. But I said active listening of what people are saying and what people are not saying. And that's how you get the 100% of the audience to participate. So I think with those two ingredients, we start to have a pretty good recipe.
You made an excellent point there. Also listening to what people are not saying. Let's go a little bit into that. So, what kind of things do we actually, or how do we miss things that people are not saying? How can we catch that? Because I'm just realizing I may have done that a lot in my life.
Mm-hmm. So I think the one-to-one is really important. I think maybe after a meeting, I did it especially with the newcomers, for example, who might not participated. Hey, what did you think of that meeting? Would you have some feedback? And try to build that conversation and that trust. I think for people to share, they have to feel very comfortable. And feedback, people always say feedback has to be specific and it has to be timely and all these things. But one point that people miss is the trust. If there's no trust, how am I going to give you some feedback, and how is it going to be well received? So it goes back to the basic, like people are going to share if they feel that there is trust. And as a leader, you have to find your different ways of building that trust, whether it's with the smaller groups, whether it's with the one-to-ones afterwards, whether it's about providing a positive feedback to the person so that they feel they feel good, they feel reinforced, and you're opening the door for that conversation to happen. I don't think there is one formula. I think it's really about trust and how you leverage all the different tools that you have to create it individually and collectively as a team.
Absolutely. I think it is, as you're saying, it is about creating that relationship, creating that, bond, um, even on professional level where they can come and share things with you, or they can even just be vulnerable and say, hey, I don't understand how to say this. And, they can just express what they're struggling with and maybe you can help them. So I absolutely love that. And guys, I have to make a point. If you really want to understand what Veronica does and how excellent she is, go and check her LinkedIn. It's a gold mine of knowledge, information, encouragement, inspiration. I encourage you to connect with her on LinkedIn because, wow, Veronica, there is not a day when I don't see your post and go, wow, where does she get all that knowledge and wisdom from? So, of course, you show how much you have traveled, how much you have learned from life. And I love that. And I'll never forget the chief executive mom. I'm almost getting emotional here. All right. So let's talk about, we have challenges, we have all these obstacles, but inclusivity has a very important value for business as well. Business always talks about in terms of profit. So how does, as a leader, you can look at inclusivity also as a profitable thing, not just something you have to do to get along or to manage teams? So how does inclusivity helps the business?
Mhm. So I think you have a very good point that inclusivity, for some people, they're going to have different motivations on why to bring inclusivity into an organization. For some people, to be honest, is pure compliance. We don't want to be there, but there is an element of truth there. For some people, it is compliance. For some people, there's the motivation, like the altruism of you do it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for the people. It's the right thing to do for the company. It's the right thing to do for the world. When you talk about businesses, though, and one point that many companies miss is that more diverse teams are actually better. They perform better. They perform on average, I read the statistics, 35% better than teams that are non-inclusive. And so I think that's important for companies to know. I was also watching listening to a podcast the other day that talked about inclusive teams and how the IQ of a team that is diverse is higher than the IQ of a team that isn't. And so if you translate, what does that mean? So it means that when you're developing a product or when you're trying to solve or work on a project, there is more innovation, because innovation, it means looking at things from different perspectives. It means bringing new ideas. Think of an orchestra. Think of an orchestra where you only have pianos, beautiful pianos. But what is that orchestra going to sound like? I think that idea, it's very, very visual. I think you can extrapolate that to the business. Well, you need all the instruments for that magic, to come to life. And I think that's the
Absolutely.
beauty of diversity. But yes, there is a financial element. So I want everybody to remember teams that are diverse perform better than teams that are not.
I absolutely love that. And the visual that you gave is perfect for me because I love orchestra and I cannot imagine an orchestra with just one instrument. I absolutely cannot. You need, and there's so much that goes into an orchestra to make it successful. You need so much variety. And I think that's what a business is. You need so much different skills, cultures. And, it's also helping because you can also serve more clients from different cultures because of you being a multicultural organization. Now, I want to just quickly take these comments. Patty says, Veronica, I just sent you an invitation to connect on LinkedIn. I love what you're doing. There you go. So go and connect. And High Tech Mother says, this is by far the best episode I've ever watched. Love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Love everything you're sharing, Veronica. I absolutely agree, High Tech Mother. And she says, I also watch your LinkedIn. Totally agree with Szebastian. Well, there you go. You've got multiple certifications there. Now, we're coming to a close, but I want to ask you something a little bit different. We've done the serious talk. So let's go a little bit towards a different angle. So, what mistake you have made that you want others to be aware of and not make? What is something you'll tell people not to do in their life?
Some mistakes.
Yes.
Oh my God, I've made so many. I don't know.
Okay, let's talk about the most embarrassing mistake you've made.
I don't know if it's an embarrassing mistake, but I think it's something funny because we were talking about languages. Don't despair if things, don't come right at first. Like when I was learning Chinese, I was in China, and I was having a cup of coffee, and I ordered some sugar in Chinese, and then the waitress, she came with a bowl of soup, because the word tang and tang, it still sounds exactly the same to me, but to the Chinese people,
Right.
it doesn't. And I think when you're talking about languages, it's always going to be open for a lot of misunderstandings, in situations where you're ordering sugar and then you get a pumpkin soup.
Love it. And I'm not gonna say something because I do have an example in my home country language. There's a word that's in Sri Lankan that means absolutely opposite and different. And I didn't know in when somebody was saying that word. Well, I'm just gonna say it. So somebody in my previous jobs was just saying, "Oh, I just went and met my Nanga," and I was like, "What did you just say?" Because in my language, Nanga means naked, and I was like, "What?" In her language, it meant older sister, and that's about the language because I was so shocked. What did you just say at workplace? And she's like, what? So it is about understanding and okay, next question. If you could collaborate with just anyone, dead or alive, who would it be, why, and what would you collaborate on?
Oh, I think I already kind of answered that. I would love to meet Steve Jobs. I would love to understand what was going through that brain in terms of project. I think I would like to ask him, "Hey Steve, how can we make this world more inclusive? Like, you created the best freaking phone. You must have an answer for this, right?"
I absolutely agree. And you know what? There's something else you shared earlier, and I was just thinking. Not only she is a culture inclusive leader, not only she is a chief executive mom, she's a freaking scientist. She knows so much. I mean, is there anything you're not? All right, last question for the day. Well, I will ask something else, but here's something I ask every guest. If you had $2 billion with you, but only had 1 hour to spend, but you could not spend it on yourself, what would you do? $2 billion, 1 hour, cannot spend on yourself or your loved ones. It has to be somewhere else.
Okay, I would think I would do like a call out to the community. LinkedIn, you have 60 minutes to send me your project, and it has to be something related to inclusion and diversity. First come, first served in little chunks of money. I think that would be, my approach, like leverage the power of the community for something good, and do it together. I
You
wish
do
I had.
realize right now you've just invited more than 500 connections just by offering that. Well, that's good. Well, this has been good. And we are running out of time, but I still feel like we can go so much more longer. But my producer's like, no, you're already over the time. So we're going to stop here. But before I do that, you've given me another idea, which is to talk about biases. So, I want to do another episode with you on biases because I think we can talk so much about that. Thank you so much, Veronica. I feel like I haven't covered everything, and it feels like it's only been 20 minutes, but we really have had a 1 hour conversation. Thank you so much for giving your time.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Absolutely. Please don't go anywhere. Stay in the green room. I'll be with you in a second. So that was Veronica Llorca-Smith. Oh my God. As I said, chief executive mom, a leader, inclusive, and scientist, and so creative with her writing, her message. I think she's really, and no offense to any of my guests, but I think she's one of the best guests I've had to date. So well done, Veronica. You've just given me so much excitement. I think I'm just going to bring you back on 10 more episodes if I can, if you have the time. And Jose says, gracias, Veronica. See you soon. I hope I said that right. Um, so it is all about inclusive leadership. It is about understanding cultures. It is about understanding identities, respecting who people are, what their names are, what their identities are. I love how Veronica practically covered all the aspects that I was not even thinking about, but actually mean a lot more to me as well. So being a leader is about listening, is about listening to what is not even being said. I love that point. Absolutely love that point. and really having the conversation, including creating a relationship with your team, making them feel comfortable. It is all about creating a space where people feel safe enough to be themselves and then give their best to your organization, to your community. So that's what all leadership is all about. And I'm not sure, I think this is Emo, I believe. Thank you, Veronica and Sebastian. I appreciate you being here, Emo, and please let us know where you're tuning in from, because I didn't catch that. And Jose, yes. Well, I'm going to give a secret. I actually know a little bit of Spanish. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I think this is the longest episode I've had, and this is the most fun episode I've had. No offense to any of my previous guests. So we'll see you next time. Take care. This was Szebastian Onne on Unleash Leaders of Change. I'm here because I care and because I give a damn to help you dream big and make it happen intentionally. Until next, take care.
You've got to be intentional about your dreams. Then only you can explore your true creativity.
For me, living intentionally means living with purpose and making sure that the story I create is the story I want to tell my daughters when they grow up.
You know what to do.